My name is Naomi, and if you're listening to this, I want you to know one thing before I begin. Sometimes life has a way of breaking you down so completely that you forget what you're even worth. That was me, not long ago. A woman who thought she was disposable. A woman who believed she would never be chosen. I was born in a small town where survival wasn't about chasing dreams, it was about making it through the day. My mother worked double shifts at a diner. My father, well, he wasn't around. He left when I was 7, leaving behind an old photograph and a hole in my heart that I swore no man would ever be able to fill. I grew up watching my mother come home every night, exhausted, her apron smelling like grease and coffee, but still managing to smile at me like I was the only reason she kept going. And maybe I was. But I also knew something deep down. I didn't want to spend my whole life in that same cycle of exhaustion and survival. I wanted more. I wanted love. I wanted someone to look at me like I wasn't just another woman struggling through the world, but like I was their everything. That dream became both my greatest hope and my deepest wound. By the time I was 27, I had worked just about every low-paying job you could imagine. Waitress, store clerk, cleaner. I had even gone to night school, hoping maybe education would be my escape. But even that door seemed to close before I could step through it. Still, what hurt more than anything else was the loneliness. My friends? They were getting married, building families, posting smiling pictures online of vacations and proposals and anniversaries. Me? I was the strong single one, the friend who always showed up with a smile, but went home to an empty apartment and cried into her pillow. It was during one of those nights that I stumbled across something I never thought I'd even consider: a website for international matchmaking, the so-called mail-order bride industry. Now, don't get me wrong, I knew the stigma around it. People said only desperate women signed up for those things. But what no one really talked about was this. Sometimes women like me signed up because we still believed in love, even if life had never handed us a fair chance to find it. I wasn't desperate. I was hopeful, maybe even foolish. So, with trembling fingers, I created a profile. I put up my best photos, not glamorous, just me, natural, smiling like I still had faith in tomorrow. And then I wrote my story honestly. Who I was, what I'd been through, and how all I really wanted was someone who would see me, not just my skin. And that's when the messages started rolling in. At first, it felt flattering. Men from overseas writing to me, telling me I had a beautiful smile, that they loved my honesty, that maybe, just maybe, I could be the one they'd been searching for. I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years: possibility. But as quickly as hope came, so did the cruelty. Because not all men came with kindness. Some came with masks that slipped far too easily. Some came with questions that made my stomach knot. Like, are you really black? Like, fully black? Or comments that stung. Like, I don't usually go for your type, but you're pretty for... Well, you can finish that sentence. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the good, tried to believe that somewhere in that sea of strangers was someone real. And then came him, the man who would nearly shatter me completely. He was charming at first, rich, or so he claimed, from Europe, a businessman with a sharp jawline and even sharper words. He told me I was refreshing, that I stood out from the rest. For weeks we exchanged messages. For the first time in a long time, I let myself believe. And then he said he wanted to meet me. I'll never forget that day. I used my savings to buy a simple dress, cream-colored, elegant but modest. I styled my hair the way I knew suited me best. I put on perfume that reminded me of my mother, of warmth and home. I was nervous but excited. I arrived at the restaurant early, hands sweating, heart racing. When he walked in, tall and confident, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the start of my new life. But the moment his eyes landed on me, I knew something was wrong. His smile faltered. He blinked as though he'd just seen something he hadn't expected. And then, without even sitting down, he said the words that would burn into my soul like acid. "Oh, you didn't say you were black." I froze. My profile had been honest, my photos were right there. I had never hidden it. But the way he said it, like it was a flaw, like it was something shameful. I tried to respond, but he was already shaking his head, looking around as though embarrassed to even be seen with me. This won't work. I have standards. I was expecting someone different. And then, right there in the middle of the restaurant, he left me. Just like that. I sat there for what felt like hours, my face burning, tears threatening but refusing to fall because I didn't want the world to see the satisfaction of seeing me cry. It was more than rejection. It was humiliation. It was the reminder of every whisper, every cruel joke, every moment in my life where my skin was treated like a curse instead of the beautiful gift it is. I went home that night and tore off the dress, ripped it from my body like it was the problem. I sat on the bathroom floor and asked myself a question I never thought I'd ask. Am I really unworthy of love? For days, I couldn't bring myself to log back onto that website, couldn't bring myself to hope again. But here's the thing about life. Sometimes when you're at your lowest, when you think the story is over, something or someone steps in and flips the page. I didn't know it then, but that cruel rejection was just the beginning, because fate wasn't done with me. And that's when the farmer appeared. After that night at the restaurant, I swore I was done. Done with dating, done with chasing hope, done with opening my heart to strangers who only wanted to break it. I deleted the app from my phone, tossed the dress I'd worn into the back of my closet, and tried to move on. But moving on is easier said than done when loneliness is louder than silence. Nights were the worst, when the world grew quiet, and it was just me, my thoughts, and that cruel voice in my head replaying over and over, "You didn't say you were black." 1 week later, I got an email. At first, I almost ignored it, but something about the subject line, "Hello, Naomi," felt different. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't desperate, just simple, human. Against my better judgment, I clicked it. His name was Samuel Whitaker. He was from the Midwest, a farmer. He wrote that he'd seen my profile weeks earlier but had been too shy to reach out. He didn't write paragraphs of empty flattery. Instead, he asked me about my mother, about what books I liked to read, about the kind of mornings that made me smile. It startled me. No one had ever asked me questions like that before. Not, "What do you look like in a bikini?" or "Are you mixed with anything?" but simple, real questions about me. I hesitated at first. I wasn't ready to hope again. But something inside me, maybe that little piece of faith my mother had planted long ago, whispered that I should respond. So I did. That first reply turned into another, then another, and before I knew it, we were exchanging emails daily. He wasn't what I expected. He didn't talk like the other men I'd encountered online. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet confidence that didn't need to boast. He told me about his farm, hundreds of acres of golden wheat and corn that stretched further than the eye could see, about how he'd grown up working the land with his father, waking up before the sun and collapsing into bed after long, back-breaking days. And when his father passed away, he'd taken over and turned the family farm into one of the most successful in the region. I remember typing, half teasing, "So basically you're a millionaire farmer?" He replied with a laugh, "I guess that's one way to put it, but money doesn't matter much when you're working 12 hours a day in the dirt." The more I learned about him, the more I realized how different he was from the men who had hurt me before. They saw